Thank you, Honorable Speaker. It is my honor to address this August House in support of the 2020-2021 budget allocated to the Ministry of Women, Children and Poverty Alleviation. The total budget allocation to the Ministry for the upcoming fiscal year is $159 million. This is certainly the highest budget allocation ever made to the Ministry of Women, Children and Poverty Alleviation. The COVID-19 is a profound shock to our societies, which has led to dramatic loss of human life across the world and presented an unprecedented challenge with deep social and economic consequences. Everyone is at risk of COVID-19. Everyone in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic has the same basic needs: protection of rights, safety, access to medical treatment, services and care, food and income security, and jobs and livelihood. Yet, not everyone has the same level of access, often because of who they are or where they work, with the various aspects often intersecting. Therefore, the Ministry is required to step into the new fiscal year with a determined approach and bold prioritization that reaches the furthest behind to provide better and effective services to Fijians and those most in need. On that note, I applaud and thank the Honorable Attorney General and Minister for Economy for the bold and decisive 2020-2021 budget. Honorable Speaker, across every sphere, from health to the economy and security, the impacts of COVID-19 are exacerbated for the most vulnerable, including women and girls, people living in poverty, persons with disabilities, children, older persons, single parents, LGBTQI people, and informal workers. A central theme of the Sustainable Development Goals is the pledge that no one will be left behind. This commitment remains paramount for the Fijian government and is reflected in the Ministry's budget. The priority for the Ministry now is to ensure that the unprecedented effect of COVID-19 is managed and minimized, particularly in relation to its implications on those that the Ministry is mandated to serve. Government does recognize that this is a human crisis and human beings must be at the center of the response and recovery plans. Honorable Speaker, I'm pleased to highlight that the Ministry of Women, Children and Poverty Alleviation over the past 5 years has seen considerable increases in its budget allocation. While we did have a slim cut in the 2019-2020 budget, we were allocated a total of an additional $20 million in the COVID-19 response budget, which aimed to guarantee carrying on payments to our social protection beneficiaries across different schemes. This was done against the backdrop of the combined impact of COVID-19 and TC Herald. With a $14.4 million increase in our 2020-2021 budget, I confirm that this is the highest budget to have ever been allocated to the Ministry. $9.9 million of this increase has been through donor support funding from the Government of Australia. The rest is from the Fijian government. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Australian government for her generous support to the Fijian government as part of the Vuvale partnership. As the Honourable Minister of Economy had announced, $7.8 million will be used to top up the allowances of Poverty Benefit Scheme, Disability Allowance, and Care and Protection Allowance beneficiaries over 2 months. Honourable Speaker, the largest portion of the Ministry's total budget allocation in the new fiscal year is for the administration of the nation's core social protection programs as in previous years. Those benefiting from these programs include women, pregnant women, single parents, children, the poor, and persons living with disabilities and the elderly. The Ministry is pleased that the 2020-2021 budget will support to maintain the existing social protection programs, which include the Poverty Benefit Scheme that targets poor households, the Care and Protection Allowance, which seeks to assist less fortunate children in single-parent households or who are cared for by guardians or grandparents, and including children in the residential homes under the care of the state. The Poverty Benefit Scheme that currently assists over 25,000 households has received an allocation of $38.3 million for the new fiscal year, whereas the Care and Protection Allowance program that currently assists 8,366 households has received an allocation of $12.3 million. In addition, The allowance of $100 under the social pension scheme will be maintained, with the eligibility age remaining at 65 years. The budget allocation to the social pension scheme in the new fiscal year is $55.3 million. Currently, there are 45,898 recipients under this program. Interactions with current beneficiaries have revealed appreciation to the program because it has helped restore the self-esteem and self-worth during an age where they're often seen as a burden even to their own families. This commitment is again reflected in the budget allocation for the National Council of Older Persons and the funding support given to the 3 state-owned homes for the elderly, and also towards its much-needed upgrade, which is currently underway. The expanded food voucher for rural pregnant mothers will be maintained at $50 in this new budget year, with an allocation of $1.2 million in the new fiscal year. So far, 3,127 women have benefited from this program in the current financial year. We also continue to administer the disability allowance with an allocated budget of $9.3 million. This program currently supports over 8,000 beneficiaries at the amount of $90 a month. We've heard from Honorable Ngerengere Tambua about the importance of the budget for the modification of homes for persons living with disabilities. She said, and I quote, "The loss of funding to Habitat for Humanity will mean that persons with disabilities may have to wait 5 to 7 years to get assistance from private benefactors. Many may not get any assistance at all," unquote. This statement, Honorable Speaker, intentionally glosses over the fact that there is a budget allocation for the modification of homes for persons living with disabilities under the Ministry of Housing. As honorable members of this House, we must always give full facts, because thousands of people are listening to us and believing every word that we say as members of this august House. It is irresponsible to gloss over important facts like that, because there are thousands of disabled persons out there listening to us. First, it was about Teen Fish earlier today, and now about disabilities. It may not be the same amount that was allocated in the current year, Honorable Speaker, but the budget allocation is there. She is right in that the budget isn't being given to Habitat for Humanity. That doesn't mean that the service will not be provided. The service will now be played, the role of modifying homes will now be carried out by the Ministry of Housing with carpenters from the Public Rental Board and the ministry itself. To Honorable Ngerengere Tambua and others from the opposition who may wish to preach to this government about the importance of Fijians living with disabilities, please don't, just don't. We know how important they are. It was this government that gave meaning to the empowerment of people living with disabilities in this country, making them visible in laws, in policies and programs. It was this government that had the heart to give them a special place in the Constitution and followed through laws, policies and programs. Honorable Speaker, in total, across 5 ministries of government has allocated a total of $21.8 million to empower Fijians living with disabilities in the coming fiscal year. The opposition has the audacity to call this budget irresponsible, rudderless, theoretical, deceiving. Tell that to the over 80,000 Fijians that rely on the social protection net of government, which my ministry is honored to serve. Honorable Speaker, I'm pleased to share that the ministry also received an allocation of $20,000, which will ensure the continuation of the recertification exercise to ensure that those benefiting from social welfare payments are in fact those who are supposed to be benefiting from it. For this exercise, all social welfare beneficiaries, except for those receiving the disability allowance, are required to fill out a form to be witnessed by authorized personnel, basically to prove that they're still alive and are the ones receiving the social welfare allowance. To date, 79% of all relevant beneficiaries have fulfilled the recertification requirement. For those who haven't fulfilled this requirement, their allowances will be suspended from August. Such allowances will continue to be suspended until the recertification requirements have been fulfilled. If these requirements are not met by November this year, allowances will be terminated. This is in line with government's ongoing efforts to ensure that the social protection net truly captures those who deserve to be helped. So it's an appeal to those of our beneficiaries who may not have filled out the recertification forms to come forward and fill these forms out so that you don't have your allowances suspended. We will also be working on the upgrade of the Social Welfare Management Information System, which is supported by the Government of Australia and which has been allocated $2.1 million. On another note, Honourable Speaker, I've been advised during the day about large numbers of our beneficiaries crowding BSP premises around the country for fear that they might not get their allowances if they do not switch banks. I advise that social welfare payments will continue to be deposited in beneficiaries' allocated bank accounts, depending on the banks they have already nominated. There is no need for social welfare recipients to change accounts to BSP right now. The Department of Social Welfare will contact recipients over time to make the options known, and it will be their choice if they wish to change banks. Until the Department of Social Welfare contacts you with further information, please do not worry about changing banks now. Honourable Speaker, currently the Ministry chairs the National Coordinating Committee for Children, the national body that is made up of government entities, civil society, and international organizations such as UNICEF and ILO that looks at improving the lives of Fijian children. We're happy to receive an allocation of $100,000 for the new fiscal year for the Child Protection Program. We are also given funding of $300,000 as grants to voluntary organizations that run 8 residential homes around Fiji for children who are under the care of the Director of Social Welfare. We are pleased with the Community-Based Corrections Program budgetary allocation of $250,000, which will enable us to continue to strengthen community-based corrections mechanisms as an alternative form of sentencing for those who qualify under the relevant law. Honourable Speaker, in the new fiscal year, we've been allocated $3.2 million to continue with the revamping and upgrading of the homes for the elderly. It is envisaged that the allocated budget will enable us to finalize the capital works at the Lambasa home, which is expected to finish in the next few months. This will give the residents in the home a more dignified and conducive environment that they can enjoy. Honourable Speaker, I'm delighted to share that the Ministry continued to fully operate the 2 toll-free national helplines during the COVID-19 lockdown periods, namely the Domestic Violence Helpline 1560, administered by the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, and the Child Helpline 1325, administered by Medical Services Pacific. We are pleased that both helplines have been allocated a budget of $200,000 each. The helplines have been crucial in intercepting emergency calls related to abuse of women and children and providing them the necessary assistance as required, and we look forward to continuing to provide the services effectively in the new fiscal year. Honourable Speaker, the Ministry is privileged to be able to work with our partners from the non-government sector in dealing with the mandate that we have, empowering women, children, the elderly, those living with disabilities, and the poor. Examples of these strong partnerships include the National Coordinating Committee on Children, the Fiji National Council for Disabled Persons, the National Council for Older Persons, and indeed, the Gender-Based Violence Working Group, the COVID-19 Response Gender Working Group, and the National Working Group on the Prevention of Violence Against Women and Girls. So, Honourable Biman Prasad, when it comes to domestic violence, we work very closely with our non-government partners. Honourable Speaker, the Ministry is satisfied with the 2020-2021 budget allocation for the Department of Women as a policy and advocacy unit of the Fijian government for the advancement of gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. The 2020-2021 budget reaffirms the Fijian government's commitment to the agenda of gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls with the allocation of $2.9 million, complemented by an additional $2.7 million, which is supported by our development partners, including the Government of New Zealand, Government of Canada, UN Women Pacific Partnership Program, UNESCAP, and UNFPA. To this end, I would also like to acknowledge the Australian government for their invaluable technical support provided through the funding of our National Gender Advisor, who is instrumental in assisting the Department of Women in implementing all of the Ministry's core projects and programs on the empowerment of Fijian women and girls. The impact of COVID-19 has highlighted the heightened inequalities, particularly in relation to women and girls' safety, and limited access to economic resources, while women's frontline roles as health workers in service industries and in the care economy have become more visible than ever before. We now all know that Fijian women are essential service providers. We also have seen gender-based violence increasing at home, online, and in public spaces. The situation demanded that the ministry, more than ever before, to adopt strategic and bold approaches with focus on areas of highest priority to address the inequalities and place all Fijian women and girls and gender equality front and center of recovery plans if we are to build inclusive resilience to future shocks in line with the 2030 Agenda. Honorable Speaker, I'm pleased to share that the ministry in the new fiscal year is well placed to move forward with the introduction and implementation of a number of important strategic initiatives, including the development of Fiji's National Action Plan to prevent violence against all women and girls, rollout of the Gender Transformative Institutional Capacity Development Initiative across government institutions, development of Fiji's country gender assessment, rollout of Service Delivery Protocol Phase 2, and kickstart of an evidence-based and inclusive dialogue, as well as tailored interventions on women's economic empowerment, and resilience building with focus on micro and small women-owned enterprises, self-employed women in informal sectors, particularly across handicraft and cultural industry. It is important to underscore that the breakdown of 2020-2021 budget allocation for the Department of Women includes an additional $100,000 for NGO grants and a significant increase for women's institution funds with an allocation of $500,000. Honorable Speaker, we've all heard from Honorable Salote Rondrondo today about the Barefoot College. I'd like to reassure Honorable Rondrondo that the construction works at Barefoot College has started, and the budget allocation of $3 million will assist us in continuing with the construction of the project. Honorable Rondrondo has suggested that we shouldn't continue with this construction at this time. I beg to differ. If COVID-19 has taught us anything at all, it is to look at alternative forms of employment which do not rely on external customers. Barefoot College will do just that, empower women to become solar engineers and micro-business owners within their own communities, complementing government's efforts in promoting green energy in rural communities. So, Honorable Speaker, I firmly believe that it is during such a time as this that we need projects like Barefoot College to be prioritized, and I'm grateful for the allocation. I simply cannot understand how one can promote the empowerment of Fijian women and girls and in the same breath shoot a project like this down. Honorable Speaker, there's been an obsession with funds kept under R in the national budget. The opposition has made it to sound like we will not get the money under R. Nothing could be further from the truth. To put this in perspective, for the Ministry of Women, Children and Poverty Alleviation in the current year, approximately 80% of our budget was under R. As of today, 99.74% of that budget under R has been released to the ministry. The obsession is simply unfounded, Honorable Speaker. So to conclude, the new fiscal year looks promising. The ministry is adequately resourced with 2020-2021 budget.
Order.
Do not be scared of R. The ministry is adequately resourced with 2020-2021 budget to carry on with its important ongoing and new strategic programs. We recognize the challenge that COVID-19 has posed on us, but we are determined to give the best possible services to Fijians and those most in need. This is a time of reckoning for our national and personal values and recognition of the strength of solidarity for public services and society as a whole. With this, we are prepared to take on the new fiscal year with greater motivation and ability to serve our people better. They say that the greatness of a nation can be judged by how it treats its weakest member. One needs to look no further than the budget for the Ministry of Women, Children and Poverty Alleviation to see just how great our nation is. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.